Show of hands real quick. Who here is from Huntsville? Wow, a lot of you. Good. I am not. I'm from Dallas, Texas. My name's Arron Harrell, cybersecurity engineer. Been doing it for about 20 years now. Spent a lot of time with a lot of the security vendors out there, and then the company that I'm with actually now, we kind of jumped over to the other side of the fence, and now we do is validation. So you can see the name of the company there, but it is what it is. It's a lot of fun. It's a different mechanism. What we're going to do is we're going to have a little bit of fun with this presentation. Usually, our CISO, the CISO for our company, does this presentation. Anytime he has a conflict, he calls me. Thanks. So I've been here for 4 days and I'm ready to go home. But no, it should be fun. It's called Hackers, Hooligans, Heists, and History, and we will actually go through every single one of those things. So first off, let's talk a little bit about early malware. So 1971 to 2003, first replicating program or code was built, actually for PDP-10. Basically, the only thing that they wanted to do was see if they could replicate code or if code could replicate. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it took weeks and days for the code to replicate. But at the end of the day, it did it. And then, of course, you had the computer virus was coined in 1983, and then the first PC virus called Brain was in 1985. But now what we're going to do is let's take a leap forward. And that leap forward is Code Red, 2001. Who remembers Code Red? Okay, good. Code Red was actually pretty cool. This is where propagation really took a big step forward. So instead of it being days or months, it was now hours that it would take to replicate. The vulnerability for it was actually found in June 18th, 2001. So if you see, the patch was released on June 20th. So that's actually pretty quick. 2 days. Of course, now we're talking about 2001. But still pretty quick. And then the exploit was on July 12th. Next, we hop to SQL Slammer. Who remembers SQL Slammer? Boy, I do. I remember them all. Back in 2003, the good thing about this, or actually I wouldn't say the good thing, but it's kind of cool from an engineering perspective, but its infection rate would double every 8.5 seconds. So at the end of the day, 90% of the vulnerable systems that were out there were compromised in 10 minutes. So very quick, very fast propagation. Anybody ever heard of Gary Min? It's a pretty cool story. So Gary Min was an engineer for DuPont. And at one point in time, he was, and DuPont doesn't have that many competitors. Worldwide, you can say they've got about a handful, about 5 big competitors out there. Gary Min, however, got tired of working at DuPont, and he wanted to go work for a competitor. Unfortunately, that competitor was in China. So basically, what happened was Gary Min would download all types of intellectual property from DuPont. So basically, at the end of the day, what happened was they got tipped off by all of his downloads. So actually, his rate of downloads within their environment was 15 times more than everybody else within DuPont combined. So that tipped him off. And then what happened? Now the FBI got involved. The FBI went and raided his house. They found $400 million in intellectual property. So what? And he actually got tipped off, and he knew that they were coming. He was shredding everything. He was magnetizing hard drives, you name it. He was trying to get rid of it. But unfortunately, he got busted. So you figure $400 million is equivalent to 8,000 Teslas. And anybody knows, all of us know, anything more than 7,500 is just being protected. All right, Jerome Kervel. Who knows this guy? So this guy was interesting. He was in development for SOG Jim, which is a large bank investment company. So what he did back in 2007 was he actually wrote the code to do trading for this company, SOG Jim. But at the end of the day, he didn't want to do it anymore. So he said, you know what, I want to get into trading. So they allowed him to start trading. So after a few non-trades, fake trades, so to speak, he stole $7 billion from SOG Jim. So rule of thumb here, If you're going to spend $1 billion, go for 7. You're going to serve the same time. What is that equivalent to? 140,000 Teslas. So next, anybody heard 10 Days of Rain? Didn't get a whole lot of publicity over here in the States, but it did in Asia. So 10 Days of Rain, and actually, our CISO was actually involved with this, because this was kind of a McAfee project. So he was working for McAfee at the time. So really what it was, and it's actually pretty interesting. So this was North Korea targeting South Korea. And what they wanted to do was, and this the reason why they call it 10 Days of Rain was they had a multi-tier botnet. And if you understand multi-tier botnets is you have a botnet and then that has a manager and then that manager has a manager and so forth. Extremely resilient. So what it also does, heavy encryption. So it utilizes a lot of encryption, and if you think about it, there's no real way to reverse engineer encryption. But what it comes down to is you can't mitigate via static analysis. You have to utilize dynamic analysis when it comes to mitigating encryption. Advanced code was written least privilege. So it's kind of like the military way of thought. A knew what B was doing, B didn't know what A was doing, C knew what A and B was doing. So you knew it came from a specific country that had to do this. So basically all they did, it was very simple, but it was actually really good code. It was just a DDoS attack. And that's it. It utilizes DNS queries, ping flooding, you name it. And of course all that old technology, but still worked the same way. But it lacked an interpreter. So there was nothing else that it was going to do because it didn't have an interpreter. The only thing that it could do is a DDoS attack against South Korea. And then at the end of the day, the system self-destruct after 10 days, hence 10 days of rain. So why? Why do this type of attack if nothing is actually going to happen? What's that? Proof of concept? Yeah, you know what? That's pretty close. They wanted to see how they were going to react. How long it would take for South Korea to actually react to this attack, who they were going to call, what they were going to do, and how long it would take them to shut it down. Is basically what happened. After 10 days, though, it basically overwrote the hard drive, and the machines were done. And that was it. That's all it did. But it was a very interesting attack. So cyber is a great equalizer. And why? Because it's inexpensive. It's very cheap. Low attribution. So if a tank crosses a state line or a country line, you know exactly where it's coming from. In cyberspace, very difficult to figure out where it comes from. It's easy, very simple. It's nation state, non-state, or minor actors. It could be anybody that could launch an attack. So you don't need bullets and weapons in order to fire off a cyber attack. It's extremely cheap to do. You could be a terrorist, non-state group, whatever the case may be. And then compress space and time. It doesn't take a whole lot in order to launch a cyber attack against anybody. And of course, you see Samuel Colt over here. I always like that quote. God made man, Samuel Colt made man equal. Next, there's technology shifts, and there's advantages to technology shifts. So if you can see back in around 300 BC, the Greeks were very known for bronze and iron. And that was great. Good battlefield, as long as it was a flat field, and you didn't have to flank anybody, because you weren't going to flank anybody with all that weight. Plus, you had a spear. And then next, around 120 BC, the Romans found out they could do steel, which changed the game. Now they could maneuver a lot faster. They could go around mountains. They could flank the enemy. So just that technology shift makes it and creates a huge advantage for them. Next, in the 15th century, you see the Janissaries, so muskets. So another technology shift. Of course, they weren't the ones that invented bullets, but what they did say was, all right, I'm going to put a musket in your hand, your hand, your hand, and your hand. Very easy to do. You can learn how to use a musket in about a week. When you're dealing with spears and you're dealing with swords, you're going to be learning how to utilize that for about a year before you can do anything. But if you see this other guy over here, everybody's got muskets, but that guy's got a stick. Nobody liked him. And then we go, then we look at Germany. Look at World War II. You had the Tiger tanks. The Tiger tanks were extremely sophisticated, great technology, best tanks out there. But that was a problem because of the complexity of them. So the Americans with the Sherman tanks, very easy, very simple to drive. If you could drive a car, you could drive a Sherman tank. And the Russians were kind of right in between there. The Russians were actually pretty smart about it. They would actually build it cheapest as they possibly could because they knew their tanks were going to be blown up within about a week or two. So they'd put, sorry chairs in them, folding chairs. They wouldn't give them paint jobs, nothing. They had no supply chain to fix tanks because they knew they were going to blow up. No need to do it. World War I, Germany didn't believe in tanks. Germany had about 20 tanks total. They didn't believe in that type of warfare. In World War II, they had about 250,000 tanks. But their tanks were so complex, it took weeks, sometimes months, for an operator to get used to how to drive one of those tanks. Today, technology evolution has sped up exponentially. So we see the AK-47 here. Everybody's seen one of these. How many have shot one? Yeah, many times, all of them. Great weapon. You can throw it in the mud. You can do anything you want to it. And next thing you know, it's still going to fire. It's a very resilient weapon. But today, now we have these. Technology has really stepped up. The problem with them is they're extremely expensive. You can get AK-47s for extremely cheap. These, you cannot. But it's a different time, it's a different warfare. Ooh, we're kind of going fast. It's kind of like speed dating. So next, we got a few things here, and this is pretty interesting, how we're really making a shift from kinetic to non-kinetic investments. So up on the right, you see Vietnam up there. Pretty interesting. They spend more money on cyber warfare and hiring people instead of bullets and guns. Down below, you see this is actually in South Korea. South Korea is an interesting state because they'll have massive competitions. They'll bring high school kids in, they'll bring college kids in, and what they will do is they will have massive attacks, capture the flag exercises, things of that nature. One story here is, and you can actually, probably can't see her, but she's wearing a red hat. 16-year-old girl goes in there, and everybody's thinking, what is this girl doing? She's over there sitting on her phone, playing games, doing whatever she wants to do, while everybody goes over here. It's a 48-hour event is what it is. So they're wondering what she's doing there. Well, unbeknownst to them, she's actually the one that put all the USB ports in the place. So when they're doing their capture the flag exercises, while everybody's saying, hey, I got 2 flags, hey, I'm Bill, I got 4 flags, she's over here going, I've got 25. Because she's already hacked them to get their flags. Interesting. Over to the left, you see the aircraft carrier. So that's an old French aircraft carrier. I think it's about in 1962, 1963. They were actually just going to use it for target practice. But there's a country that actually purchased it, and it is actually their mobile cyber warfare station. Can anybody tell me who owns that? And it's the only aircraft carrier that they got. It's in Latin America. I'll narrow it down. I'm sorry? Brazil. Yep, it's actually Brazil. So Brazil owns that, and it's their cyber warfare unit. Not very economical, though, if you think about it. There's a lot of latency in satellite, or you got to have one hell of a long cable to go with that thing. So let's talk a little bit about espionage. This is pretty interesting. So this story actually starts an oil and gas company, and really what happens here is that there were a few hackers out there, and it was actually a phishing exercise. and some of the C-level personnel within this oil and gas company were hacked with a spear phishing attack, unbeknownst. For 3 years, they had keystroke loggers on all the executives' computers, all their cameras, all their microphones, everything for 3 years. This is a fundamental shift. And that fundamental shift is when you're dealing with oil and gas, it's a big problem. And you better be secure because flags can change hands, borders can change hands. Because at this point in time, what can happen is if I have all that information, I know exactly what you would be bidding on an oil deposit for. So if there's a big oil deposit off the coast of Rio de Janeiro, and I know what you're bidding on that, I can come in just a little bit higher and grab that deposit. So securing everything that you have, and when you're talking about oil and gas, you're talking about a lot of things, not just the corporate environment, but you've also got your SCADA environment as well. Anybody ever heard of American Semiconductor? And I'll just build this one out here, because I'm not good at flipping these things. So American Semiconductor has basically, and you see these wind turbines. Wind turbines, easy to build. There's many companies out there that build them. However, the code that actually runs these things is all proprietary. And American Semiconductor is probably was one of the biggest ones out there. 600 employees. Basically, this guy over to the left, and I'm not good at saying his name, but this guy over to the left basically worked for American Semiconductor, and I believe he was out of France. And he had access to the code that ran these turbines. So when he had access to the code, he got tired of working for American Semiconductor. So what he did was he gave one of their competitors, sent him a little message because they knew they needed the code. So he said, all girls need money, I need girls, Synoval needs me. And Synoval was actually the competitor. So they knew exactly what he was talking about when he sent him that message. So what did he do? He gave up the code. What it ended up doing was 600 employees got laid off. Over $1 billion in share value was lost for American Semiconductor. And then, of course, insult to injury. What did Synoval end up doing at the end of the day? Started selling their stuff in the U.S. Just completely took their market share away, just from code not being secured. And of course, he's in jail. 2017, we had Wannacry. Who remembers that one? Yeah, everybody remembers that. Who can tell me what the country that got most hit by Wannacry? I'm sorry? China. Actually, China got hit most by Wannacry. And the reason why is because most of China's Windows operating systems are pirated. They don't get updates. So most of Wannacry hit China really hard. But interesting enough, you see this group of gentlemen right here. These are actually the group of gentlemen that caught Dillinger. As you can see, they look pretty smug. So this is part of this was the FBI team that did it. Who can tell me why I've got Wannacry and the FBI up here at the same time? Bingo. That's exactly why. Yep, Eternal Blue. So, did you guys see the ransomware attack that happened? What was it, last week? Eternal Blue, still out there. People still haven't patched their systems. I think it was the city of Baltimore that got hit, and not only the city of Baltimore. I think there was actually 12 cities in total. Still haven't patched their systems to take care of that. But yes, that is exactly why. The NSA exploit, Eternal Blue, was utilized, and it still runs rampant today. It's unbelievable. And they actually had a patch before the attack occurred. So then we jump to 2018, and everybody says, oh, well, we're in the cloud, or we have an MSSP. It makes me laugh and cry at the same time. Because there's just a lot of things that can go wrong. I'll tell you a use case. It actually happened to me while I was doing a proof of concept with our software. Basically, what had happened was an MSSP was being utilized by one of our clients. And basically, they weren't blocking anything. We walked in there, we ran a bunch of attacks within their environment, tested the efficacy of their security stack, everything possible. And then when it came back, the results from it, they had only detected like 3 attacks. So we had the CIO and the CISO of that client in a room doing basically a technical presentation, and they actually invited the CEO of the MSSP to come out. And that CIO ripped into that CEO for about 15 minutes. It was extremely uncomfortable. I wanted to leave. And at the end of the day, he said, "You guys didn't block anything. I cannot believe it." He goes, "Well," the CEO goes, "Well, sir, you're not paying us to block anything. You're only paying us to detect." He said, "Blocking is another contract. If you would like to step up your contract, we can certainly do that for you." So just a problem. Didn't read the SLAs, didn't read the contracts of the MSSP, didn't know what they were getting into. So always read your SLAs. And now, how many people have heard of environmental drift? When something is good, and then all of a sudden something is not good within the environment. You're blocking, your logs are making it to your SIM, a human's being notified that something has happened, and then all of a sudden one day it stops. And it can happen just about any time, anywhere within the environment. It's because the infrastructure team doesn't talk to the security team. There's not enough communications within an organization to deal with this. So you got a proxy, you got a bad SIM. Well, somebody threw a proxy out there, didn't notify the security team. Now that proxy's blocking syslog. Now my logs aren't getting there. And nobody knows nothing about it. Everybody thinks everything's just fine. It's just a slow day. It's been a slow week, it's been a slow month. Nope, that proxy's blocking syslog. And then we had another proof of concept that we were doing, speaking of bad tap and bad span, where there was a $12.5 million deal that they had just gave up for some technology, network technology. Very good technology as well. However, somebody went in there and fat-fingered a tap. When they fat-fingered it and they brought that tap down, that technology was only seeing unidirectional traffic. That technology has to see bidirectional traffic. If it doesn't, it can't put the packets together. So everything was getting dropped on the floor. So it was a $12.5 million paperweight sitting there, doing nothing for a year, for an entire year. And when we went in and we started doing tests, we started figuring out that they weren't getting their logs, and then all of a sudden, we found out exactly what the problem was. You got firewall rules, ACLs, any of those can be fat-fingered at any time. We do a lot of testing within the production environment. When we do some testing within the production environment, a lot of times, it doesn't get changed back. That's a problem. And this is where environmental drift comes into play, because I want to be automatically notified when something comes off the rails. I want to be able to validate those tools on a daily basis. I want to automatically validate those tools on a daily basis. When something goes awry, I want to know about it. And then we run into this a lot. Patch broke my EDR. Put a patch out there, all of a sudden something's changed. Now you're not detecting, now you're not preventing. Your logs might not be making it to the SIM. Happens all the time, unfortunately. So at the end of the day, cybersecurity is really a broken formula. We spend so much money on cybersecurity, the tools that we have, the processes that we have in place, the people that we have in place. And unfortunately, it is not effective. We have a big problem with cybersecurity being effective right now. And it's because those companies out there that are selling you the technology don't want you to block or prevent. They make money off of you by misconfigurations. I know I was there. I worked for the big vendors for many years, and I would get calls on any attack. Aaron, your IPS didn't block this attack. You said it would block the attack. Oh, well, I did. Do you have it configured correctly? Nope. the end of the day, I'd go on site, not configured correctly. And that's the biggest thing, is they're not configured correctly. All these tools out here are really good. They're extremely effective, but we have to tune them properly. And the only way to do that is by validating them. Launching attacks within the production environment to see how they react to real-world fire, and do that safely. So the fundamental challenge is cybersecurity is based off of assumptions. So we assume technologies work as the vendors state. They always promise us this. When I used to work for the big vendors, I would have to take my sales rep to the side and say, please don't ever say that we're the only ones that do this. Please stop saying that. We're not. Everybody does it. All the technologies out there are really good. They just need to be tuned properly. We also assume that they're deployed and configured correctly and stay that way. That's where environmental drift comes in. And then we assume our people are correctly handling those events and those processes are effective. So I can actually test my people within my organization. When I launch an attack within the corporate environment, how are they going to react? Are they going to go look at the firewall logs? Are they going to go to the SIM? What are they going to do? See how they act in process. And then we assume changes to the environment are properly understood, communicated, and implemented correctly. Questions? Anybody got any questions? I'll stop there. No?
You had talked about the agreements between a company and a vendor. How do you feel, say, the importance of being able to interpret a contract or a contract language and the significance of that role with the vendor? You talked about something that is smart language.
Yeah, first things first, I mean, when you have an SLA or you have a contract out there and you have a vendor that has given you an MSSP or something like that, take it right to legal. They understand all that garbage talk that they put in those SLAs. So that's really the first thing that you want to do. And then have your corporate attorneys interpret that to you. Absolutely. So let's think about this. So controls effectiveness and validation. What we want to do is identify the gaps. Where am I lacking? Am I overlapping? Do I have multiple technologies that are doing the same thing? I can figure that out by validating my tools. And then what we want to do is we want to get to optimization. We want to tune them prescriptively. So if I launch all 14 variants of Wannacry, including the Tor download, the DNS queries, the Eternal Blue, the double pulsar, everything associated with it, what I want to do from that perspective is I just want to see it land on disk. I'm not going to detonate it. I want to see if it lands on disk, see if my layered security strategy is being effective. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, our worst enemy is end users, unfortunately. But that's just the nature of the beast. If you give somebody the opportunity to click on something, more than likely, they're going to click on it. And that's bad. So we want to make sure that we are validating our entire security stack, our layered approach. Tuning them, see if it does land on disk. If it isn't blocked, follow the trail, follow your logs. See what didn't block it. Why didn't Palo block this? Oh, well, here's the rule right here. I've got an allow rule. All right, I need to go flip the switch. Let me go flip that from detect to prevent. Then rationalization. This is where we get into overlap. So if I'm running multiple vendors' firewalls within my environment, who's more effective? I'm validating the tool stack by launching those attacks and seeing what the outcome is. But at the end of the day, who works better? So if Palo's blocking 90% or preventing 90% of the attacks that I'm throwing at it, and then my checkpoint firewall is only blocking 10%, what am I going to do? Let's rationalize my stack. Let's pull out that checkpoint firewall, stop paying for the contract, stop paying for the maintenance, and reallocate those dollars to another project. Maybe I need EDR, maybe I need DLP, maybe I need an FTE. Whatever the case may be, rationalize your security stack and make it much more simple. Simplify your security. Then get to that known good baseline. Once you get to that known good baseline and everything is green and you're blocking everything and all of my logs are kicked in and somebody's being notified that something has happened, now I've created my baseline. When I create my baseline, now I can set monitors for environmental drift to automatically run these same attacks at specific intervals whenever I want to see what the outcome is. If anything goes red, I'm automatically notified. You've got environmental drift. Somebody threw a proxy on the network. Spam port got spun up or spun down. An ACL goes stale. A correlation rule goes stale. Whatever the case may be, you're automatically notified. So we protect to enable. So I said something about it earlier. So the security industry has no economic motivation to solve all your security problems. So, and there's just a few things on here. So understand that it's not about cyber risk, it's about the brand. Operational and financial risk from cyber attacks. Pretty important there. Probably one of the most important things about any type of hack or breach is brand damage.